Hey y'all, welcome to Art of the Budget. My name's Nicole, my pronouns are she and her, and I live in the Pacific Northwest on what is the traditional territory of the Coast Salish nations. I'm going to be talking about sharing my income today. This is in response to a question I had on Instagram. And if you're new here, I'm an artist and educator currently learning about budgeting, saving, and planning for the future and sharing what I learn along the way. So I had a question from someone on Instagram about why do I share income when she actually said when you're like don't have a lot of money, you have a broken phone, you need to replace your phone. So I got this question back in September, but I wanted to wait till November to put the video out because I guess I just feel like November and Thanksgiving is a complicated holiday, but one of the sort of simplistic messages that gets out there is like our need for gratitude right alongside Black Friday, which is this highly consumerist holiday in the US. So I wanted to talk about sharing my income. So I wanted to say, first of all, that I was introduced to this entire concept by old friend and fellow artist, Shug McDaniel. They were a photographer, they were building their business, and it was kind of like put out to them that they should be sharing the capital that they have access to because of all the ways that their identity is privileged, and they were really transparent about sharing that process. And they currently have a Patreon account which they share half of it with, they share always half of it, which I think is really interesting. So that was how I was first introduced to the idea of sharing income and the idea that it's something that you can do to be accountable for the sort of kind of unfair privilege. I work really hard, but I also have a lot of privilege in that I'm a white woman. I'm straight passing, and I have all these kind of things stacked for me, not against me. So that was how I was first introduced to it. And then, of course, watching personal finance YouTube, there are a lot of people who tithe. Now, I'm not religious, I'm an atheist, but I was really intrigued by this idea of tithing 10%. I personally wouldn't choose to give my money to a church. I might choose to give it to a religious organization, but I definitely wouldn't give it to a church because that's just not consistent with my values. But I was interested in the idea, and so that definitely has been somewhat of a guide to me. So first of all, Shug's experience and Shug's actions, and then this kind of concept of tithing 10%. Okay, so I was actually curious about what you all do, and so I decided to make a list of questions. I'm going to answer them, and I would love it if you would answer them down below, or if you make videos, if you would consider making a video answering these questions. Okay? All right. So question number one, what do you call this line item in your budget? So I call it, if you've watched my budget check-ins and whatnot, I call it radical intersectional feminism. That is because that's like the kind of work that I want to support. I did ask on, I think in Instagram, or maybe in a budget check-in video, I asked what other people thought it could be called. And one of my friends and viewers, Ashley, suggested support or community support, which I really like a lot. So I'm definitely adding that into the language I use. So thanks for that, Ashley. Okay, so why do it at all? Why is it important? And so for me, just personally for me, right now I'm making twice as much money as I'd ever made previously. And a lot of that was, chosen poverty because I'm an artist. So I was choosing poverty over lack of freedom. And so because I'm used to living on a lot less, even though I don't necessarily have a lot of money, I feel like I can and I should, because I want to, reallocate some of that. Second of all of those years of choosing poverty, of doing things to kind of forward my art career, which required doing a lot of things that were self-subsidized or doing a lot of work for free, I was able to do for a few reasons. One, because I'm clever. Two, because I took student loans. Yes, I have a benefactor. It's called student loans. And also because of the generosity of other people. I didn't have, although I have a supportive family, I didn't have access to, family money, but I have had access to the generosity of others. So that's, anyone from my family, like letting me stay with them when I was like between places, from my literally friends or people I barely knew letting me stay with them for, next to nothing, or otherwise supporting me. And I've tried to do that as well. But I guess something I realize is that people who are in a position to give me share a little generosity with me, they might not be in the position where I can pay them back, so to speak, but like I can sort of pay it forward, I guess. So anyway, I just want to recognize that like so many things that I've been able to do are because of the generosity of others, like literally people like being really generous with me. All right, so last but not least, it feels nice and it's something that I can do really easily. I actually don't have a lot of time, so actually sharing my time, which is something I did a lot more in the past, doesn't feel really possible, but it does feel possible to share income. And I'm personally happy to share my income. I would happily pay more taxes if it meant that people had access to healthcare, fresh food, parental leave, we're safe from state-sanctioned violence, etc. So for me, that's just something that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so where or with who do you share funds? For me, I primarily started sharing funds and doing art fundraising for grassroots abortion funds. So these are funds that help people pay to access abortion health care, but also may help to get them a flight to the closest clinic if they're far from it. They might help them pay for a hotel room. They might help them access child care, all those additional expenses that go along with accessing healthcare in a country that doesn't prioritize it. And then I also give to organizations that support LGBTQ communities. Specifically, every month I give to the Trans Lifeline. I just give a small amount and I give it monthly. On Patreon, I specifically donate to women and non-binary folks and femmes of color who make art or content that I want to support. And basically anything else I feel like giving to in a month. So I have funds that are not pre-allocated, and that means that I could help out if somebody I know needs something, or if there's a natural disaster, or whatever might come up. Okay, next question. How much and how do you decide how much? So for me, you might know, I share a 5% of my base pay and 2% of my, for sharing, and then 2% of my base pay I buy art from independent artists. And so maybe that's like a little bit selfish, but basically about 7% of my base pay. I only require myself to allocate 7% of base pay, so I don't include, and this is take home. I also don't include side gigs in that. So I base it off of my base pay that I make every month if I have no side gigs. I can allocate more, but I require myself to allocate that much, no less. That said, I do sometimes have to adjust. Sometimes that might be a month where that's the only thing I have any wiggle room. And so I do give myself a little bit of grace if I need to do that. So this is, it's a working goal. Okay. All right. So what if you can't afford it? So I think this is just important to note. If you can't afford it, don't sweat it. Frankly, I don't know. I actually had a really hard time finding a hard statistic. So if you know, please let me know. But I mean, I think most people in this system, in the United States in any case, do not really make a livable wage. I couldn't find a hard statistic, but it seems like The majority of people in the US make less than $50,000, and in most places that's not enough really to like rent a house, like rent a 1-bedroom apartment. So most people don't make a living wage, and so if you can't afford it, don't worry about it. That's just like understandable. If you have time, you could donate that. Action is so extremely valuable. I mean, time is really our most valuable resource. But if you don't, also that's okay too. I think just by like living your, like doing the best you can and like just sort of focusing on improving your situation, that will like naturally give you more bandwidth and more time to focus on like the next most important thing. So, you know, I think we just have to live as best we can, as close as we can to our values, and for different people that will mean different things. So if you do have time, some things that I wish I had time to do is to escort at a reproductive health center that needs it, especially if you're in the South. See if you could help with like childcare, transportation, that kind of thing. I don't have a lot of time right now, but that's something I'm thinking about trying to do here, because I know some people will come to Washington for abortion services. See if there's a way that you can support queer youth in our community. The community I live in has a lot of opportunities for that, so I'd really like to do more of that in the future, and maybe getting involved on a city level to address folks who don't have housing and like concrete solutions and respectful treatment of these folks. I know this is a huge issue where I am, and I'm from Florida, so it's another place where this was a huge issue, and I would love to move towards prioritizing some of my time to help with that in some way. And then of course, like mentoring young people. There's an organization in my town called the YWCA, and it's pretty amazing. I'd love to be more involved with them if possible. So yeah, that's all my questions. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure. Yeah, that's all my questions basically. What do you call this line in your budget? Why do you do it? Why is it important? Or why would you do it? Where or with who do you share funds? How much and how do you decide how much? And what about if you can't afford it? So if you're interested in sharing a video about this, let me know down below. If you want to just answer down below, I'd love to hear your answers. Let me know if you have any questions about what I do. And I just want to say thanks to my friend Shug for inspiring me, to all the other personal finance bloggers for like sharing their money stories, and to Sarah for asking this really important question. Right, thanks.